Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be talking about some more single prize Pokemon from Surging Sparks. Surging Sparks is the upcoming set releasing November 8th, so that is in a few weeks. It's not that far away, and all the cards are out in Japan. I believe at the time of this video being released, at the time of recording, they are not all out. But anyways, in the previous video, I talked about a bunch of good single prizers, but there are a lot more as well. I talked about 10. I'm going to be talking about 10 more. Also, sorry, I'm feeling a little under the weather. It's not super bad, but it might affect my voice, so hopefully it's all good. Anyways, let's hop in with the first card here, which is Smoochum. By the way, these cards are from Pokemon Proxies, and yeah, people like ask all the time. It says on the cards, and then I say in the videos, and they're like, "What is this from?" It's PokemonProxies.com. I guess it's the whole thing. Anyways, you have Smoochum, which is a baby Pokemon. That means it has a free attack, 30 HP, and free retreat. And its free attack here is Happy Kiss. This says for free, search your deck for up to 2 basic Psychic Energy cards and attach them to one of your bench Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. This is an interesting card. It puts them on the same Pokemon, so a deck like Dragon Ball E action, not necessarily getting much value, but you might still play this to get some value, to get energies into play, because you definitely do have issues with getting energy in play. Psychic is a solid type right now. There's like a Spathra EX that's not a Psychic Pokemon, but it uses Psychic energies, and so this could be cool. And I think this card's just pretty solid. It's free energy acceleration. TM Turbo Energize is an okay card. I think it's a little underrated, but it's not anything super special. However, that costs energy, so you can't always use it in the ways that you want to. Smoochum is completely free, and baby Pokemon are theoretically nice with their free retreat as well. The low HP is a big issue, but this is a solid attack and one that I do expect to see some level of play, not like a ton, but it is a pretty cool baby Pokemon. Probably the second best, maybe the third best. Right now, Cleffa is just so clearly the best baby Pokemon. The rest are kind of bad. Elekid, I think, is okay, and there's some others that are. And I don't think any of them are super terrible because they do have these free attacks that do have value in different situations, but a lot of them lack a lot of impact. But getting 2 extra energies is really nice, and it's not like you're attaching here to use the attack. You might have to attach to retreat, so then you're just getting one extra. You're just one energy attachment ahead, but if you don't have to attach to a Pokemon to retreat, you can actually attach where you want it. Now you're 2 energies ahead, which is a really nice amount of value. If you're in like Dragon Ball, you're just 1 energy ahead, but that's still nice. The next card we need to talk about here is Eevee. Eevee is, of course, the Pokemon that evolves into all the evolutions. The evolutions in Standard are somewhat mediocre to underwhelming. However, this Eevee is really good with its ability to boost its evolution. If it's in the active spot, it can evolve during your first turn or the turn it was put into play, or both. And this is really nice because this pretty much just says you can evolve it instantly. It doesn't need to be in the active. That's really where you want the Pokemon to end up, but you can't. You need to switch it in before you can evolve it, but that's not that big of an issue. It's something you'll have to do in that turn, anyways, if you want to attack. So it should be fine. And Eevee is definitely a Pokemon with a lot of potential. We saw the Energy Evolution Eevee in the past, and we've seen a bunch of different Eevees that have a really nice value. And this Eevee is definitely another one of those. It's a card that will end up seeing play. We'll see how much play, or it will probably end up seeing play. It is definitely like a really good card. It's essentially the perfect previous evolution because you can just evolve instantly. And we have the new Sylveon EX. That's what this is meant to be paired with, but there are some other cards as well and that are like okay, as I said, and you could also mix and match them to make a toolbox style deck as well. Then we have Azumarill. This one I believe was also in the Sylveon deck, and it says its attack Twinkling Soap. Apparently is how it's translated here. The attack that you have on this Pokemon can be used for only one Psychic if you have a Terra Pokemon in play. Getting a Terra Pokemon in play is not hard. It's obviously not completely free, but it's pretty easy. And then you can just attack 230 for one Psychic on a stage 1, and you do 50 to yourself. But this is a lot of damage. You admittedly it is a single prizer, but you will have a 2 prizer in play as a bit of a liability, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal, especially if you put something to play like Pikachu EX or Mass Ogre Ponyax, which both have defensive abilities, which will help them out. Azumarill is a card that just has very good damage output. It does 50 to itself, which isn't ideal. You'll be putting yourself down to 70. If you attack 3 times, you will knock yourself out. But also, if you attack 3 times with your Azumarill, you're probably in a very good position. And if you do end up like giving up an extra prize to something like Dragapult or something like that because of your attacks, it is what it is, but it is still a very solid damage output number on a single prize Pokemon for only one energy. This is a card, I don't know exactly what its home would be. Psychic is a solid type, but it's mostly played with Gardevoir EX, and Gardevoir EX is a. And then there's Drago. You could put this with Dragapult EX. That might be a really solid inclusion there. But with something like Gardevoir EX, you don't really care. This just isn't particularly good. It's not what you're wanting to do. It's not completely terrible, but you need to do some weird stuff, and it's just not great. Next card we have here is Wo-Chien. Wo-Chien is a really interesting Pokemon because of its first attack here, which says for Grass Colorless, it does 20, and you do 120 to 2 your opponent's bench Pokemon, but you need 3 or fewer cards in deck. This attack is absolutely insane if you didn't have that restriction. And that restriction is something that you can dig for because you'll be playing a very turbo-style deck here to discard lots of cards from your deck. You'll be playing Trekking Shoes and Squawkabilly EX and Pokestop and things like that just to run through your deck. And Pokestop will be rotating in a little while after this card is released, but it's still fine, right? So Wo-Chien here, I think it will be a fun card. I don't know if it'll be quite good enough, and the energy is not free or it's not super easy to pay. It's not super hard either, but you need to probably maybe energy switch until my Sugar Pontiac. The Gardenia's figure is an option, but that's not great. So you just kind of gotta just go for it. But I think it is gonna be a really really fun Pokemon. Obviously, Manaphy will shut this down. There's another Rabsca, which I believe does 200 for one if you have 3 or fewer cards in deck, but it's also an evolution, so that's not great. This Wo-Chien, though, is a really, really fun card and one I do want to try out and see how much value you can get out of this. And if you can do this tournament going second, which initially seems crazy, but you can get very turbo if you really try. At least decently turbo. In expanded, this seems really, really fun. In standard, it seems kind of cool, but not necessarily as meaningful. But still a card that I do want to try out. Then we have Kecleon, and this is where we start to look at a bunch of control and stall cards. Kecleon has this stall ability, which says if any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. Does not stop effects of attacks like instant knockouts or damage counters being placed on, but it will stop straight up damage, which is most attacks. This is pretty strong. Obviously, if you flip heads, it's insane, and if you don't flip heads, then it doesn't do anything. So Tongue Up is your attack. This is meaningful and it is pretty bad. 30 snipe for 2 colorless is pretty underwhelming, but Kecleon with its ability, if you're able to buy yourself essentially a free turn, that is really, really nice. It is Buddy Buddy Pop and Search, but only has 1 retreat. So it is a card that if you use as just a wall and you do flip heads, it can be quite nice. And buying a free turn is insane in the early game setup phase of the game. If your deck is a bit slower than your opponent's, this could win you games and allow you to not fall behind in the early game based on prizes. If they do have something like Dusknoir, they can knock it out, but then they do have to pop their Dusknoir to knock this out. Dusclops won't be getting you, so Kecleon definitely seems like a bit of a scary card, and one that I was considering talking about last video, but one that I do believe has a decent chance of ending up seeing some play because of its really potentially very scary ability. Then we have Miraidon. This is another defensive Pokemon with protection code for Lightning Colorless. It does 40, and it is a future Pokemon. So you can buff this to do a good chunk of damage. Front L damage done to essentially this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. If it leaves the active, the effect stops working, which means that it's really weird. Essentially, it's just immune to EXs when it attacks, but it can be like gusted around. So it says all your future Pokemon. So I guess your opponent couldn't like bench snipe your future Pokemon if Miraidon's in the active with like Radiant Greninja or something, but that seems kind of weird and kind of strange. So essentially, this is just like a Mimikyu card, but you need to attack first, which is not ideal. However, you are able to do more damage with Iron Crown EX is on the bench and with Future Booster Energy Capsule attached. So then you could be hitting theoretically 140, and that's obviously really good. That's twice as much as Mimikyu, but if you're just hitting like 80, that's still more, so it is nice. And Miraidon is just a solid inclusion in future-based decks, and it could be essentially a lightning type Mimikyu as well, and just have that value there. It's not quite as strong, definitely, but it is a solid card. Then we have Rotom, another lightning type card, which is a more control style Pokemon as opposed to a stall style Pokemon. But we have Energy Short, which does 20 for each energy attached to your points active, which is okay, not particularly impactful, but not that bad either. Then we have Crash Pulse. Your opponent reveals their hand, discard any item and Pokemon tool cards you find there. That is theoretically very strong. If your opponent's playing lots of items, then you could just go ahead and Crash Pulse and discard all of them. And this could be really meaningful against decks like the big basic turbo decks, and it's theoretically very strong there. It's also pretty solid against just general decks as a general control attacker. One issue I do have with this card is that it doesn't discard supporters, and supporters are definitely a big threat to control. That's kind of how you beat control right now, is with supporters. Control can't really apply pressure to them anywhere near the same way that they can to items with stuff like this Rotom, but then Airy. Airy's very similar to this Rotom. They fulfill similar roles, but this Rotom does require Lightning Energy to attack versus Airy's just a supporter for the turn. But then there's also Misfortune Sisters, and you can item lock much easier than supporter locking, which you can do, but it's quite hard. So Rotom is a cool card that could end up seeing play, could end up seeing a decent amount of play and being very annoying as a control card. The next card we have here is another control card, though it could be played in different decks, and it has electromagnetic sonar. I talked about this before as being the same attack as on Regieleki from uh, Astral Radiance, I think. No, is that the right? Yeah, Astral Radiance. It's from the Regi's set. So it's a solid Pokemon that sees play in Standard now. That doesn't see a ton of play, but Dedenne is Buddy Buddy Pop and searchable, which feels really good. Recovering any trainer for a colorless is nice, especially even in just decks where you want, say, a Stadium back, like Terapagos EX. I could even see playing a copy of this, although it is kind of sketchy because you also have energy issues in that deck, depending how you're playing it. But there are times when you run out of stadiums and you need an extra one, and this will get you the extra stadium if you've like lost all the stadiums, and then it can get other stuff like gusting supporters or other things as well. But the main thing you're looking at would be gusting supporters or the stadium, or of course control stuff, where you can just do various different combos with the Dedenne. And this card does seem really great because Buddy Buddy Poffin, when used well, is very strong. We have another control card. This is the last control card we'll be talking about, which is Turtonator here, which for 1 fire, you discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon EX. And a lot of the best decks in the game are EXs, especially post-rotation. Probably essentially all the best decks will be EX decks. And you can just go ahead and discard an energy, turn one going second, or whenever. It's pretty easy to do. Fire is not the best type. It's a mediocre type, but this is a solid card, specifically mediocre in control. But you do have Chiyu EX. It's not like a weird type to be attacking into control decks. And so this is a card that is a pretty simple attack. It does have 3 retreat costs, but it's a pretty good card. And one that I think I will play. I think it will see some play within control because you probably have fire energy already and you can get good value here. And you could even play it in something like Charizard EX as well. Then we have Annihilape here. Annihilape has 2 attacks, which are both pretty interesting. You have Tantrum for 1 fighting, which does 130, and it's now confused. That is a little bit awkward because self-confusion, your opponent can kind of just ignore you. However, it is still a very, very solid damage output for only 1 energy. Not absolutely insane. There's the other Annihilape, which is arguably probably better, but Annihilape still. This one is pretty solid, especially in the early game for applying some pressure. Then we have Destiny Fight, which is fighting colorless, and both actives are now knocked out. This is very, very solid, and it does allow you to instantly one-shot threats like Charizard EX, Dragapult EX. It does knock itself out, which is a big issue, but this could be very strong as just like um, a one-shot option on anything, which a lot of decks can't really deal with all the time if they're just focusing on one Pokemon and they're not really prepared for something like this. And there are other good Annihilapes as well. I think this card is a cool card that can fit into a cool evolution line, which is forming into a bit of a deck. It's not forming into a super great deck, but one that does have some options and I think will eventually form into something that is, I mean, I'd say right now it's like kind of meta viable with the Annihilapes you have, but it will form into something even better. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, joining the channel, all that good stuff. And as I'm excited to see you in the next video.